Alright, so in our last explainer, we got into the whole idea of power sharing, right? Well, today we're zooming in on one of the biggest, most important ways to do it: federalism. This is the real nuts and bolts of how power is split, not just horizontally, but vertically, from the very top all the way down to your local city council. So let me kick things off with a question that might sound simple, but it's actually pretty deep. What do we call the Indian government? Is it a union government, a federal one, or a central one? It's a fantastic question, and trust me, the answer tells you everything about how India works. Stick with me, and by the end of this, you'll nail the answer, and more importantly, you'll get why it matters so much. Okay? Here's the game plan. We'll quickly cover what federalism is, its key features, the two ways countries become federations, and then we'll dive right into how this all plays out in India, from how it's practiced to that third tier of government. Alright, Section 1. What is federalism really? Well, at its core, you can think of it as a system of government where power isn't just held by one big boss at the top. Instead, it's shared between a central government and all the smaller parts of the country, like our states. So, to really get it, let's look at two totally different models. On one side, you've got a unitary government. Think of Sri Lanka. Here, the central government is the ultimate authority. It's like the parent who can give or take away privileges from the kids, the local governments. But then, on the other side, you have a federal government, and this is a whole different ballgame. Remember what happened in Belgium? They actually switched to a federal system. This means the states or regions have their own powers, powers that are protected by the constitution. The central government can't just snatch them back. That right there is the fundamental difference. Okay? For all this power sharing to actually work without chaos, we need a key concept: jurisdiction. It's a fancy word, but the idea is simple. It just means the official power to make legal decisions and judgments. Think of it like lanes on a highway. The national government has its lane, things like national defense. The state government has its own lane, like local police or agriculture. Each one has authority in its own specific area or over certain subjects. Without these clear lanes, you'd have a massive traffic jam, right? This idea is absolutely crucial. So, if you wanted to figure out if a country is truly a federation, what would you look for? Well, it's not just a vibe. There's actually a checklist, a set of essential features that a country needs to have. Let's break down this blueprint. So, here are the big seven. 1. You gotta have at least two tiers of government. 2. Both tiers govern you, the same citizen, but they have their own areas of control, their own jurisdiction. 3. This isn't some informal agreement, it's written down in the constitution. And that leads to 4. You can't just change these rules on a whim. It takes both the central and state governments to agree on any big changes. 5. What if they disagree? That's where the courts come in. They're like the referee interpreting the constitution. 6. Each government level needs its own money, so their sources of revenue are spelled out. And finally, number 7. The whole point of this complicated setup is to achieve two things at once: keep the country together, and at the same time, celebrate all its unique regional differences. Now, here's something interesting: federations don't just pop out of nowhere, they have origin stories. And how they're born? Well, that actually says a lot about who holds the power. There are basically two main paths a country can take to become a federation. Alright, let's compare these two paths. First up is the coming together model. This is like a group of friends deciding to form a club. independent states like the ones that form the USA or Australia voluntarily join forces to become bigger and stronger. In this setup, the states hold a ton of power and they're usually all equals. Then you have the holding together model. This is more like a large family with lots of different personalities. A big, diverse country like India or Spain decides to divide its power among its regions to keep everyone happy and manage all that diversity. Here, the central government usually keeps a bit more power, and not all states might have the exact same privileges. And that holding together model? Yep, that's India. So now let's bring it all home and see how these federal ideas actually work right here, starting with our own constitution. Okay? Here's a super important point, especially for your exams. If you look through the Indian constitution, you won't find the word federation. Kind of weird, right? Instead, it calls India a union of states. But don't let the wording fool you. The entire system, the whole structure, is built on the principles of federalism. All those 7 features we just talked about, they're all there. So, how does the Constitution actually divide the power? It's pretty smart, actually. It uses a 3 list system. First, there's the Union list. This is for the big stuff that affects the whole country: defense, foreign policy, banking, etc. Only the national government can make laws here. Then you have the state list. This is for more local issues: police, trade, agriculture, etc. Only the state governments get to decide on these. And finally, there's the concurrent list, which is a shared space for things like education and marriage. Here, both the union and the state can make laws. But if the laws clash, the union government's law is the one that stands. But wait, there's more. The system has some special rules. For example, what happens with subjects that didn't even exist back then, like, say, e commerce or cyber laws? Those are called residuary subjects, and the union government gets to handle them. Also, remember how holding together federations can have unequal powers? Well, that happens in India. Not all states are treated the same. Some states have a special status to protect their unique history and culture. And the final piece of the puzzle is that this whole setup is built to last. Changing the fundamental rules of power sharing isn't easy. It requires a massive yes vote in parliament and then has to be approved by at least half the states. It's designed to be stable for a reason. Okay? So we've talked a lot about the rules written in the Constitution. But having rules and actually playing by them are 2 different things. The real success of federalism is all about how it works in the real world. So let's look at how it's actually been practiced in India. Right after independence, Indian federalism faced some huge tests. The first was creating states based on language. Some people were scared this would break the country apart. But it actually did the opposite. It made the country stronger because people felt their language and culture were respected. The second big test was language. Remember the chaos in Sri Lanka when one language was forced on everyone? India was very careful to avoid that. Hindi is an official language, but there's no national language. Instead, 22 other major languages are officially recognized. This smart, flexible approach was absolutely key to holding the country together. The relationship between the central government and the states has also had its ups and downs. For a long time, back before 1990, one party was often in power at both levels. This sometimes meant the central government didn't really respect the state's power. But then after 1990, everything changed. Regional parties became much more powerful, leading to an era of coalition governments. Suddenly, the central government had to listen to and respect the states. This shift was a game changer and really strengthened the spirit of federalism in practice. So we've got the center and the states. But wait, in India, it goes even deeper. A huge step was taken to add a third level to this whole structure. It's a process called decentralization, and it's all about bringing power even closer to the people. This third tier is all about local government. You've definitely heard of them, the panchayats in rural villages and the municipalities in your towns and cities. This takes the idea of federalism and drills it right down to your neighborhood, making our democracy that much more hands on. So, what's the big idea behind decentralization? It's pretty simple actually. It's about taking some power away from the big guys in the capital and state capitals and giving it to local governments. The thinking is, who knows best about the problems in your area? You and your neighbors, right? A huge step was taken in 1992 with a constitutional amendment that made these local governments way more powerful and independent, truly embedding them into our democratic system. So, after all this, why does it matter so much? Just look at this number 121. That's how many major languages were counted in the 2011 census. 121. How on earth do you manage a country with that much diversity? That's where federalism comes in. It's not just a nice idea, it's the very glue that holds a country as incredibly diverse as India together. So, to wrap this all up, I want to leave you with a question to chew on, something to really make you think. We talked about India's language policy, but what do you think has been the real outcome? Did it make us more united by being so accommodating? Or did drawing lines based on language just create new divisions? And what about English? Has it just become the language on top? There are strong arguments on all sides. Thinking this through is the best way to really get a handle on the complexities of federalism. So, what's your verdict?